Welcome to Geared for Growth. I'm your host, Mike Mortlock, and today we're diving into the intersection of proptech, personal finance, and property strategy with someone who's burst onto the scene in a big way, Nick Melrose, the founder of Scale.App. If you've been around the startup or property tech ecosystem, you might have already heard Nick's name floating around. He's recently picked up the People's Choice Award at the PropTech Pitch Night, and for good reason. Scale.App is one of the most interesting and ambitious new tools designed to help everyday Australians, from first home buyers to seasoned investors. It helps them gain real clarity around their finances and property plans. We're not just talking about a budgeting app or another borrowing power calculator. What Nick and his team have built is a full-blown financial simulator that combines consumer-grade UX with institutional-level modeling, all in the palm of your hand. So what makes Scale.App different? Why did Nick sink his house deposit into building it? And why is so much of the platform free for first home buyers? In today's chat, we cover the origins of Scale.App and why most calculators fall short, how aspiring buyers can make smarter decisions without getting caught in the emotional trap of just getting a foot on the ladder, the level of sophistication built into the app, from tax depreciation and capital gains triggers to rent vesting scenarios and income shifts over decades, and why this could be the single most important piece of tech a first home buyer or investor uses in their wealth journey. Whether you're an investor yourself or just someone looking to help the next generation step into home ownership with eyes wide open, this is one you'll want to stick around for. Let's get into it. Nick Melrose, thanks for joining me on Geared for Growth.
Thanks for having me, Mike. Good to be on.
Well, it's the first time you're on the show, and I've gone through a few episodes recently with some old regulars, but you've burst onto the scene, and it would be remiss of me not to highlight some of the amazing tech that you've been working on and developing, and only recently launched with Scale.App, which, forgive me, the gong that you got at the PropTech Pitch Night, what was that one?
People's Choice Award, which sounds like a bit of a farce, but it's the one that matters.
It's not a participation award. It's a room full of people that are either in PropTech or PropTech sympathizers and have decided that what you've built is the standout one. So don't sell yourself short, mate. But let's kick it off with the why behind Scale.App. What made you want to build a platform that's going to help everyday Aussies get on top of their finances? And give us a bit of an intro into what it does and how it's going to help people.
For sure. Well, thanks for the kind intro. First, Scale.App essentially is a combination of a budgeting tool that everyone's very familiar with, and quite a complex portfolio analysis and scenario modeling tool. So what we've done is we've married basically all of the stuff everyone's familiar with in terms of their income, student loans, living expenses, business income, with a timeline that shows them exactly how far away they are from ownership without them spending a cent. And then from that point onwards allows them to run scenarios to project the next 50 years of their portfolio plan. How it came about is I quit my job 2 years ago now. I was formerly doing financial modeling for a company that does renewable energy projects, and kind of with that financial modeling background, I'd saved what I thought was a house deposit or an investment property deposit. Naturally kind of built a financial model for myself, and then realized that I had the deposit, but it would cost me kind of 10, 15 grand a year to run for the first couple of years, and therefore I couldn't afford it. But the only way I was able to figure that out is because I had the financial modeling background. And I think it kind of just led me down this rabbit hole of like, all right, well, what if I didn't have that background? What if I was just someone that was like, had saved a deposit and had worked hard to figure out that first step into the property market, and didn't have the tools or understanding to get quality advice that would be able to help me understand my ability to operate that property past just a massive milestone, saving that deposit and buying your first property. Yep. So what I kind of did was essentially try to build out this financial model. I included everything from my student loan to my pay-as-you-go tax, my tax return, complex property stuff like capital works depreciation, renting a single room in your property, and like the capital gains liability that you forego by doing so, and build it into this interactive timeline within Scale.App that allows people primarily that are not even homeowners and investors, although it does all of that as well. But our mission is very much for first home buyers, or what I'm calling aspiring first home buyers,
Yep.
who are potentially what seems like light years away from being able to buy their first home, and at that point can't justify paying a financial planner or a buyer's agent to help them build a strategy to get into the property market.
I love that. And it begs the question, of course, you had the financial modeling background, but to go to the effort of building a model for yourself, I'm kind of wondering, like the internet is full of all these calculators, all of the banks have calculators, the insurance companies have calculators, there's a million out there. Did you not feel like there was something that was going to do that job for you? Or was it a matter of, look, I've actually learned that there's way more detail than the generic calculators go into?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. That's genuinely exactly how it unfolded. Is naturally, obviously, my first instinct wasn't to just start building a complex portfolio model for myself. I naturally searched up portfolio model like on the internet, and all that comes up really is, as you mentioned, a lot of lead generation tools, which are great because I'm sure people at that stage of their journey, if they're actually ready to buy, they're getting funneled into quality services, right? But the issue for me is that I wasn't there yet. I was still trying to figure out how I get to the point where those borrowing power calculators at that point make sense to me even. And yeah, what I found is really there's a lot of portfolio analysis tools which do kind of high level portfolio analysis. They'll project your value, they'll do your equity, your loan repayments, operating and standard cash flows, and probably some key metrics. And then there's a lot of obviously the standard budgeting tools that basically just do what's your bank balance and what do you wish it was and what's the percentage difference between the two. So I think what I was just surprised by was the fact that the portfolio analysis tools were omitting all of the touch points to your personal finances that matter really to a portfolio analysis tool. Like your income tax matters because your income, your salary and living expenses and student loans stuff matters because it affects the negative gearing impacts of your portfolio. The same with your capital gains, and the same with your land tax, right? Like it goes down to basically like the level of how many kids do you have determines the land tax threshold of which you then get taxed on with your spouse, right? So like I was surprised that there wasn't any portfolio tools that had those elements in there, knowing that those were arguably some of the three biggest touch points that drive a property portfolio. And then obviously there was just nothing that drew on the kind of more consumer side or aspiring that more kind of inexperienced user side where they can see their budgeting and the stuff that they look at all the time and are used to, but in the context of their ability and dreams to own a property portfolio at the time, in the future, sorry, which I think is safe to say a lot of young Aussies are thinking about almost constantly at the moment.
So there's a whole cohort of young Aussies that are presumably hell bent on getting their first home, or if they're rent investors, their first investment property. And people will know, okay, well, I earn this much, and my rent is this much, and the things that I need to buy to survive leaves me with this sort of gap. And then we go, okay, well, if it's that much a year and it needs to be 50,000 or 100,000, it's X amount of years. But I'm guessing that there's a level of sophistication that you've kind of uncovered through your own journey and your background that says, well, actually, there's a little bit more to it than just getting that 5% or 10% deposit, because there's the purchasing costs themselves and also the maintenance as well, which I know you've thought about.
For sure. And I think that's all, or they're all kind of key considerations for entry, right? Which a lot of people understand. Obviously, there's a lot of focus on kind of obviously how much you can afford, right? But I just feel like or at least I felt even more so at the time when I started building Scale.App, that there's not enough focus on how much people can afford on an ongoing basis. And a couple of key stats that came out was that I think a report from Helia in last year said 54% of first home buyers saying, one, the cost of living is the primary barrier to entry to the housing market, which is surprising given the cost of housing itself is the talk of the town. Yeah. So like that kind of ability to like not only see how much you can afford, but also transpose that across a life plan that has the granularity of like month-to-month decisions. That's what we bring to the table with Scale.App, is allowing a university student to graduate uni and make the decisions of like, do I want to go on a gap year for a year and then start work? Or do I want to work for 2 years and take a year off? Like those types of micro decisions that set up or very much heavily impact your ability to buy and build your dream portfolio in the future. So I guess as you said, we help people into the market and we show them exactly when they can buy based on the purchasing cost of their dream property or their first property. And then we make sure that they can afford to hold it, which that same report from Helia said that 50% of homeowners, of first home buyers, report to not be able to afford that mortgage after the first year, which is
what a horrible situation to find yourself in after you spend, maybe half a decade or a decade saving for a home and then thinking, gosh, we might have to sell this thing because it's killing us.
Exactly. I guess, and those are the people on the luckier side, right? If you don't have the government or parental assistance, a joint median income is taking 11 and a half years for a 200 grand deposit. And of course, by the time you save that 200 grand deposit, that 200 grand deposit is no longer 200 grand. It's like you're chasing your ghost, really. So I think what Scale.App offers is the ability to not only model a scenario to buy your dream home, but also suggest and be able to help users visualize alternate ways to get into that dream property. And that stuff like rent vesting, buying which obviously a lot of people are starting to kind of hear about and adopt, a lot of buyers agents in particular.
Yep.
But the ability of a strategy of buying a $500,000, $600,000 property somewhere that you don't want to live and renting it out so that in 6-7 years you can come back to it and roll that into a property in a place that you want to live. And that's really what we do. We allow people to understand those micro decisions that form a successful property portfolio and life plan more so.
Yeah, awesome. And that's a great segue too, because most of the people listening to this show are either property investors or aspiring property investors. And of course, first home buyers need a lot of help. Yes, they do get a lot of government assistance, and there's some good measures coming out with uncapped first home buyer grants and an increase in the thresholds and those sorts of things. You've made this program free to first home buyers, but for the investors listening, what is it that Scale.App you think is going to help the person that is maybe making that rent vesting decision, or they have a house themselves, they've got a property or two and they're trying to build a portfolio to set themselves up for financial freedom? Where do you sort of lean into on that? The Geared for Growth Property Investing podcast is presented by our business, MCG Quantity Surveyors. If you're an investor or a property professional looking to get the best tax depreciation deductions for yourself or your clients, please get in touch with us at mcgqs.com.au. It's our mission to help as many property investors as we can to maximise their claims and maximise their property education as well.
For sure. So obviously our mission is very much first home buyer oriented. That's what's got me out of bed in the morning for the last 2.5 years. Is what started it as I was an aspiring first home buyer. I still am an aspiring first home buyer because my old deposit's been sunk into Scale.App. But what we've kind of made it completely free for them. But what it's really special, most of its functionality is focused on investors, right? So helping people, we wanted to provide a tool that doesn't only help people into the market, but allows them to navigate life beyond that first entry into the market. And what that looks like for an investor straight off the bat is how much equity do I have right now, and what's the earliest point when I can roll that into my next property and my next property and my next property. Scale.App's simulator is a 50-year financial projection, right? And the ability to not only have live data from our integration with proptech, and to bring kind of that stock-like visibility that people are used to for their stocks and crypto to property investment, as well as the ability to project that current understanding of their portfolio into the future and kind of help inform that strategy and decisions to roll out to that next portfolio, next property and the next property.
And one thing that I was not necessarily prepared for when I first sort of got in touch with you, I suppose the introduction was, okay, well, there's some tax depreciation components to the Scale.App. And I thought, okay, well, this guy's going to need, quite a lot of help, because you see a lot of calculators online. There's lots of Excel spreadsheets where it's basically plug in the tax depreciation for a year, and then it either flatlines or it diminishes it with some artificial kind of formula. But in you showing me behind the curtain, I was amazed at the considerations that you made. You referenced one before. If you're renting out a bedroom, the way the ATO normally would look at that is, like, let's say it's a 3-bedroom home, you're renting out one room, so maybe a third of the home, or you could do it on a square meter basis, because when you rent out one room, there are assets that that renter will utilize, like, let's say there's ducted air conditioning or a hot water system. They don't all live in that space. Deeper than that, you've considered that people will potentially occupy their property and then move out of the property. You've considered renovations and improvements, both pre and post purchase. And this is not actually your specific area of expertise. And I thought, if that's the mindset that you're putting on all of these little buckets, and there's way more than just the tax depreciation, then this is going to be a very powerful tool. How have you actually achieved that? Obviously, you're a clever person with that financial modeling background, but there's a lot of nuances to a platform like this to get it as well as you've done it.
For sure. And that's the exciting part, if I'm going to geek out for a second, to be honest, and that we geeked out on it last week or the week before. But it's all of those kind of events, right? So we wanted to create a thorough financial modeling tool. That's what I did in my former job, and we basically, to understand and pull together all the fragmented information that was around for all these various components, I effectively just read the ATO guidelines. I think it was 180 pages, made notes and built a financial model on it. But I'm not a financial planner. I'm not a licensed tax agent. I don't have the accreditation to be able to get behind that and say this is accurate. We had a tax company jump on board to basically write and formalize those guidelines, and then we went through an 8-month financial audit process, a model audit process with a global accounting firm to make sure that all of those theories and principles are accurately reflected in our calculations. So not only are people, as you said, able to perform all these unique and kind of very detailed and like events throughout their portfolio, but that's what kind of now makes it super exciting as someone that understands property back to front. We've got stuff like the 60 absence rule of a primary residence if you move out, go overseas, like all of those things that a lot of people don't even know about. But if you're in your timeline as an investor and you're about to make a decision that might impact your capital gains tax liability or exemption, I should say, then we'll say that this is something to consider. You should go talk to Mike, or you should talk to someone that can actually tell you that might be the wrong decision for you. I think we've only been in market for a week now, and even the amount of times I've heard that I'm going to buy a property, live in it for a little bit, put a granny flat on it, and then rent that out, and then with no consideration to the ability, like the income tax apportionment of that, or the capital gains tax liability apportionment. Just there are so many kind of things that people think is a good strategies that the numbers just don't say the same thing. And being able to, even for a moderately experienced investor, being able to kind of drop those at various touch points throughout the app, I think is going to be the most crucial part, not only for experienced investors, but people that are coming onto the platform and growing up with us to become experienced investors, which is obviously our mission.
I think if you could take a percentage of the poor, costly decisions that people will maybe not make because of those triggers, you'd be a very wealthy person. I wanted to talk about, we've just got the latest 2022-2023 ATO tax stats, and just to be clear, you're not listening to an old episode. It is July 2025. It's just the ATO takes a little time to get those to us. The numbers for the percentage of people that own one investment property, 2, 5, 6, have broadly stayed the same, and the amount of property investors that only ever own one property, 71.5%. And I've always kind of thought, in some respects, it's a mission statement of this podcast. If we can provide more information and more knowledge, we can stop that stat from growing and maybe reduce it, because I think there's a fairly strong argument to say, if you're investing in property, you want to fundamentally change your financial future. And one property could do it, but there's a fair amount of evidence to say a couple extra is going to make it a little bit easier. Is that something that you kind of think about as well, in terms of people getting themselves into a position where they're under duress and forced to make a negative financial situation because they don't have a choice?
For sure. I think the yeah, I guess it's that whole concept of getting into a property you think's a good decision for you and not understanding the costs that live beyond that first transaction. I
Yeah.
think probably the mission focused part of me is saying the example that lives in my head is like a young family who's saving for their first home and they've got a kid on the way and they're sitting at an auction, and it's obviously quite an emotional decision, that first property, particularly with a kid, infant on the way, and they're kind of bidding, and they inevitably overspend on their first property with no kind of guidance to tell them otherwise. And I
Yeah.
think that's something that you can stretch out to investors that are just super excited to buy their first property and just want to get into the market. I think the
Yeah.
general concept of like just getting a foot in the door is almost like harmful to people that are especially aspiring first homeowners. I think you need to get a foot in the door, but you need to understand what's on the other side of the door to fully understand if you're making the right call. And
Yeah.
that's kind of our entire goal with Scale.App. Yeah.
And people talk about, you just got to get a foot on the ladder. And I mean, I've even said on podcasts before as a guest, the best time to buy was yesterday. But what I should be having is a little disclaimer to say, well, if it is actually achievable for you, it's not the best time to buy isn't yesterday or today. If you're going to put yourself in a position where if interest rates go up, you're not going to be able to cover that and you're going to have to sell the bloody thing, that doesn't really work at all.
For sure. And I think back to like, if I rewind back to when I was just starting building Scale, I think it was like mid 2023. And there was that historic debt cliff that you might remember. I think 60%
Yep.
of loans were rolling off a fixed rate at the end of COVID. I think the RBA was estimating almost a 25 to 30% increase on every home loan across the country. That was one of the things that rolled me into building a tool that had month-to-month scenario changes. And one of the core functionalities of Scale.App is the ability to have an interest-only loan at the start that'll get you into a property, but will tell you exactly what your repayments are going to be now that when you run off or roll off that interest-only loan after 2 years, now your tenor of that loan is 28 years, not 30, and your repayments are higher than you thought they were with the 30-year loan. Can you afford it then? And like that ability to run even just that small kind of but very detailed analysis is really our bread and butter. And the ability to not only access that but access it for free, it fires me up because it's just there's a whole emerging generation of homeowners that will now be able to track their ability to get into property, but also model out their entire property plan without setting them back in that savings journey, which is something that they're kind of having to face at the moment, is that decision between, do I go it alone with some Instagram videos of property experts, of which many are great, but like it's all very general and doesn't actually show any of that theory in the context of my plan and what I want to do. Or do I pay one of them and set myself back 5 to 10 grand in my savings journey already from the get-go?
Yeah, I think some of those people are great, as you say. Some of them probably should be in jail. So you got to be careful how you choose your gurus. But I am really sort of engaged by the passion that you have for the free part of the platform for the first home buyers. I think people would be mad not to be utilizing this sort of platform if that's what they're trying to do. But there's actually some really exciting things that are part of the paid side of things for investors as well. The ability to really sort of get snapshot valuations on your properties and all of the modeling stuff there. Can you share what's on offer for investors on that side of things?
For sure. So obviously, as you can tell, quite passionate about the free side of things. But as people grow up and get over the hump of getting into property, there's the ability to opt into live portfolio tracking, which is powered by our partnership with PropTrack. So that brings investors live visibility, just like their stocks, for the first time across any platforms in Australia, and understand exactly what their properties are worth. And therefore, because we've got the personal finance side of things as well on the platform, allow them to understand at every month what the impact of that negative gearing is for that financial year, all of the operational metrics, cash flows, and kind of capital gains and all of that type of stuff as well. So it starts at the top with like kind of that just being tapped into the performance of your portfolio, which again is the kind of largest asset class in the country. Over 60% of household wealth is held in residential property, yet there's very little to no visibility over it as an actual financial asset from the consumer side. So I think, yeah, so for investors that are willing and interested in kind of tracking their portfolio, it's a really helpful tool that allows you to understand where your property is now and portfolio is right now, and extrapolate that over the next 20, 30 years of your plan and understand exactly where you want to go. It also allows you to unlock kind of the ability to, if you're looking for your next property, kind of supercharge your home search or property search process. What we allow you to do is search by address any property in the country and import that into your current strategy to visualize what does my world look like if I add that property to my portfolio. We also allow them to clone that current strategy, make a duplicate strategy where they might add that property or add a different property, and therefore compare those two scenarios against each other or with a third or fourth strategy. So on the investor side of things, you have unlimited strategies. You have a bundle of those property search tokens that are in the app, and the ability to track your portfolio in the same manner that you do with your stocks.
I love that. It's like a hypothetical split testing your future.
Exactly.
I mean, I'll leave it to your better marketing people to explain that. But yeah, that's probably why I've never made it in marketing. So I wanted to sort of, there's some really inspirational things I can see that's just oozing out of you, especially with the free stuff and the first home buyer platform. You've said your goal is to give people clarity and confidence. Now, how have you managed to achieve that with such a complex model? I mean, to go to the point where you're getting audited by accountants of international note, how do you strike the balance between something that's usable for someone who's not a finance or a tax nerd, and put it into a package that guides people along the way? Because I have to say the user experience and the user interface is beautiful as well.
Yeah, so obviously it's no easy feat, to be honest, and I think having just entered market, it's obviously something we'll continue to optimize. But what makes it particularly easy is, number one, the inclusion of your personal finances. Right? Like a standalone portfolio model that doesn't just has like property theory and property inputs isn't necessarily like approachable for someone that doesn't understand that stuff from the get-go. So what that from the start or outset allows us to do is our users literally just onboard in 2 seconds or 15 seconds with their income, student loans, and expenses, and whether they have private healthcare, for example, because that impacts their tax. And from that point, they don't even have to think about property. They're just thinking about the stuff that they're all familiar with. And then from that point, you set a goal. You say, I want to buy a property in New South Wales, $1 million. I want to buy a house, and I want to pay a 10% deposit. And we'll tell you exactly what the stamp duty is, and therefore what the purchasing costs of that property are. We'll use your personal data to extrapolate out on your simulated timeline exactly when you can get into the property market. And until that point, all you just see is a date. You can just see exactly what your runway is to ownership. And our goal is to educate people when they get there. Right? We don't kind of aim to be something that people have to think about and use all the time. I think a standard consumer app is something like the metrics of retention are like, do people use it every day? Our goal is to have like a monthly active user is our key KPI. And for people to create a plan and check back in on their monthly progress towards that goal, that's our North Star. So not only the thing that makes it kind of more approachable for a younger audience is a standard budgeting tool that everyone is very familiar with. We'll show them exactly how far away they are. And then within this interactive timeline, we've basically built it in the same manner. I took it actually, I wouldn't say take, but was inspired by iMovie and GarageBand and TikTok and all the rest of those video editing platforms, where you literally interact with your strategy over a 50-year period by chopping and changing various elements and sliding across and splitting like your gross salary or your living expenses and adding like a construction loan here and there and that type of thing. So it's a very interactive platform, and I think that's what really opens the doors for people that are more younger and more inexperienced, I would say. And even, it's just a better UI for investors that know exactly what they're looking at. It's a pretty cool thing to play around with when you know what you're
Yeah, and quite amazing that it's got the ability to do everything that a basic, say, first home buyer wants to do, to a multi-property portfolio owner who wants to split test a couple of different strategies and clone one and then go, what if I tweak this? Or what if I made it interest only? Or what if I lived in that one and, rented out this particular one? It's incredible how that works. Now, I can hear people thinking, would you just be quiet and tell me exactly how I get this thing? But before I do that, Nick, is there anything else you wanted to share about the platform before we say how we can get it?
Mate, not necessarily. I think it's a super exciting time for us. It's been a long time kind of building it in stealth. I think it's a super exciting time solely because I think consumer prop tech has been begging for this for a while. And I think that's reflected in, I guess, a lot of our user base and the people I've been speaking to throughout our beta program is just that first step into the property market, helping people go from consuming the mainstream media that's saying you need to get a foot on the ladder, you need to figure it out, or you're going to be left behind, and then filling that gap between taking the first step and the discouragement that I was met with when I first took that first step, which was putting my stuff into borrowing power calculators and getting met with the privilege of getting my phone blown up all afternoon by brokers, if I'm being honest. So
Yeah.
as you can tell, yeah, I'm super passionate about our mission in terms of helping aspiring first home buyers into the market. There's 3.5 million people that are saving towards the milestone of home ownership. There's only 145,000 first home buyers a year, and that's the largest and fastest growing buyer of residential real estate in the country. So I'm just super stoked on the start that we're at the start line of our mission to help those 3.5 million people get to that milestone and also set them up for success beyond that milestone as well. So yeah.
I love that. Even for the seasoned investors that might be listening to this show, chances are you have children or nieces and nephews, and there's no way to argue that it isn't harder to buy a property for your children or your niece and nephew than it was for you. So the way to try and minimize the pain and duress of that process is to make sure that you've got the strategy, and that can be sort of quite psychologically motivating as well if you've got it dialed in and you see that progress over time. So Nick, sorry, I'll let you go.
Exactly. No, I was just saying my favourite feedback that we've had with users to date, especially those first home buyer users, is they look at it, they see their goal. The date that we give them may not be what they want to achieve, right? That we may say that they can buy their first property in 2030, 2031. And if you're sitting there as a 22, 23-year-old, maybe that's not something that you're too stoked about. But the feedback, my favourite feedback is like, I got to get my money up. I got to get my shit together and kind of get into the property market. And I think the ability to visualize exactly where you stand now without having to set yourself back in that goal, by having to outlay a bunch of cash to get that advice, and then being able to tweak and optimize your savings plan to help accelerate your home ownership journey is really what's powerful about our platform.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the old adage of sort of spend less than you earn, invest the difference is a good investing tenet. But if you can increase what you can earn as well, then you can move the needle. And so a platform that enables you to, of course, choke yourself down to 2-minute noodle level is great, but also go, all right, well, what if I didn't want the noodles, but I can find a way to talk to my employer and say, what are the progression options, or how can I upskill myself to move to that next level? I love that as well. Nick, how do we get on board with Scale.App?
Mate, we are live on the App Store and Google Play, so you can download us on iOS and Android today.
Awesome. We'll chuck a link in the show notes for you guys as well. As Nick said, they're now live. They've had a long period of waiting list. It's been an exciting time for Nick and the team in the last little while. And mate, we wish you all the best, and thanks for sharing this amazing new bit of tech that hopefully is going to change the lives of maybe 3 million first home buyers at least.
We hope. Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me, mate.
Cheers, mate.